Today, I'm bringing you a story with a truth so brutal, it'll leave you shivering and asking yourself, do we ever really know the person standing right next to us? What would you do if the person you trusted most turned out to be the biggest threat to your life? Toan disappears suddenly without a trace. His mother, Mrs. Leanne, is at the police station crying her eyes out, but diem discovers it's all just a twisted, bloody act. Tuan's life is hanging by a thread, and the villain behind it all is wearing the face of a loving mother. Now, diem is in a race against time, following a trail of breadcrumbs through the darkness to unmask this mother from hell. Before it's too late, what horrifying secrets are waiting to be uncovered? Join us as we crack this heart-pounding mystery right now. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you don't miss a single explosive detail in the hunt for justice for Toan. Let's get into it. The cold neon lights of the police station cast flickering shadows across Mrs. Leanne's face. She sat with her shoulders hunched, her thin hands tightly interlaced as she shredded a damp handkerchief. You have to find him. Toan is all I have. She choked out, her voice breaking at just the right moment, like a skilled musician hitting the most sorrowful note. Behind the one-way glass, Detective Min and Mr. Thu watched in silence. Min stood with his arms crossed, his sharp eyes tracking every blink of the woman on the other side. "See that?" Min whispered. "She's crying plenty, but look at her pupils. They aren't dilated from grief. She's observing. She's measuring the officer's reaction." Mr. Thu nodded, his face hardening. A mother's grief is chaotic energy. This is a performance. It's too perfect to be real. While Mrs. Leanne played her tragic role at the station diem, having left Tufan's farm, didn't head back to the ranch immediately. Instead, she decided to stop by Toan's old apartment in the city, which was currently under police seal. With Mr. Thu's help, she managed to slip inside. Under the dim beam of her flashlight, diem searched through the documents the police had overlooked. She discovered a small metal box hidden behind a secret panel in the wardrobe. Inside, there was no money, only old photos and a copy of a birth certificate. diem's heart hammered against her ribs as she read the details. Toan wasn't adopted from a distant relative like Mrs. Bay believed. The record showed Toan had been taken in by Mrs. Leanne from an orphanage under the guise of a charity project sponsored by his former construction company. My God. Diem gasped. She isn't his mother. She's been his handler since he was a child. Toan isn't a son. He's a project. She suddenly remembered the coldness in Leanne's eyes whenever Toan's career came up. She wasn't proud of his success. She was proud of how high he had climbed within the company's fraudulent machinery. Back on a deserted dirt road in Long Dien, Toan stood facing a burly man. The shovel in his hand trembled, but not from fear. A surge of violent memories was crashing over him like a flood. The books, the ledger, Toan muttered. "You guys killed my father for that ledger, didn't you?" The man in black sneered and stepped forward. "So you remember good. Then you should know your dear mother Leanne is waiting for you in the city to end this. Hand over the USB, or I'll send you to see your old man right now." In that moment, a site engineer's instinct kicked in. Toan didn't charge into a fistfight. Noticing the truck's engine was still running, he suddenly hurled the shovel at the windshield to create a distraction, then spun around and bolted into a cornfield where the stalks were over his head. "You son of a bitch! Get back here!" the man roared, followed by the sharp crack of a gunshot tearing through the silence of the countryside. Tuan ran for his life. A throbbing headache gripped him, but the USB in his pocket felt like a hot coal, a constant reminder of his mission. He had to find Tuan. The train ticket. It wasn't for an escape. It was the final clue he had left for himself before committing psychological suicide to protect the secret. Why did Toan forget to diem, but remember how to cook the ring? And now the ledger. The detectives concluded that Toan is experiencing dissociative amnesia, an extreme defense mechanism the brain uses when facing massive trauma. Emotional memory locked away to avoid the pain of knowing his loved one is in danger. Procedural memory still active, cooking, working. The truth zone only unlocked by survival triggers. Threats the sight of a gun. 2DM was the key, but she was also his Achilles heel. Pushing her away was his most painful way of loving her. "I have to forget you so you can live." 2DM drove like a maniac back toward Long Dien. She had just received a text from Mr. Thu. Toan left Mrs. Bay's. "There are signs of a chase. Be careful." Just then, a strange signal blinked on her GPS. It was Toan's old phone. Mr. Thu had managed to restore its tracking signal. It was moving toward the old train station. "Juan, wait for me," she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. At the quiet, dilapidated station, Toan was panting, hiding behind some wooden crates. The man in black and two others were scouring the area with high-powered flashlights. "Check everywhere he's hit. He can't have gone far." Tuan looked down at his arm. A bullet had grazed him, and blood was soaking through his old button-down shirt. He gripped the USB, his gaze suddenly locking on a figure stepping out of a taxi in the distance. A familiar red coat, hair blowing in the wind. "To diem!" Tuan gasped, his voice choking up. At the same time, one of the men spotted her. He flashed a sick grin and raised his gun. "There's the girl, grab her, and Toan will come crawling out on his own." The moment 2DM stepped out of the car, she felt a cold gun barrel pressed against her temple. She froze her breath, coming in short, sharp gasps. "Leave her alone." Toan stepped out from the shadows, holding the USB high. Under the moonlight, the vacant, forgetful look was gone. This was the face of a man ready to stare down death to protect what mattered most. "Smart move," the man in black said, stepping toward him. "Hand over the USB, and I'll consider putting you both in the same grave." 2DM looked at Toan, her eyes burning with realization. "Toan, I know the truth about Leanne. Don't give it to them. It's the only evidence we have." Tuan smiled, a sad but peaceful smile. "DM, I remember everything. The meals you cooked, the promise to make you my wife. I'm so sorry I made you wait while I was lost in the dark." His hand trembled, but not from fear. He secretly pressed a small button on the USB, a device he had rigged to self-destruct and instantly upload the data to the cloud once activated in a signal zone. "The data is sent," Toan said, his voice turning ice cold. In 10 seconds, the police will have the entire money laundering list for Leanne and the corporation. You've already lost. Police sirens wailed in the distance, their red and blue lights beginning to sweep through the trees. The thugs turned pale. In the chaos, Toan lunged toward diem, using his body as a shield just as a massive explosion rocked the truck nearby. In a dark room at the investigation center, Detective Min pinned Mrs. Leanne's photo to the center of the board, surrounded by red strings connecting different timestamps. "Look closely," Min said, tapping the board with his pen. She claims she stayed up all night praying for Tuan on the 14th. But cell tower data shows her phone was moving constantly for 3 hours, traveling from her luxury villa all the way to an abandoned industrial dump on the east side of the city. Mr. Thu, sitting in the corner, squinted at surveillance photos of the guests visiting Leanne. These people aren't friends. Look at how they stand hands, always near their belts, eyes constantly scanning for security cameras. These are professionals. Mrs. Leanne isn't a victim. She's the coordinator. The next morning, an informal confrontation was arranged. diem requested to see Mrs. Leanne. The police agreed, but hid a tiny recording device in Diem's pocket. Mrs. Leanne appeared, looking haggard, a black veil covering half her face. The moment she saw Diem, she grabbed her hand and started sobbing. "Diem, have you heard anything about Toan? My heart is breaking. I haven't been able to eat or sleep." Diem felt the deathly chill of Leanne's hand, but she didn't flinch. She looked straight into those bloodshot eyes, her voice eerily calm. "Mrs. Leanne, I found something in Toan's apartment. An old photo from 20 years ago, taken at the orphanage. In the picture, you aren't smiling. You're holding a child's hand, like you're holding on to a valuable piece of merchandise." The crying stopped instantly. The room went dead silent. Leanne slowly pulled back her veil, revealing a face that held no trace of grief. Her eyes were now as sharp as razors. "You're a bright girl," Leanne said, her voice dropping into a low, steady tone. "No more fake trembling. But being too smart is usually bad for your health. Toan is my masterpiece. I molded him, turned an orphan into a brilliant engineer to serve purposes much bigger than your trivial little romance." What purposes? Money, laundering, murder. Diem clenched her fists. Leanne let out a smirk that made Diem shiver. He took something that didn't belong to him. That ledger is the lifeblood of some very powerful people. If he doesn't return it, I'll have to reclaim the defective merchandise. You think the police are protecting you? No. They're just watching us put on a show. Meanwhile, at the old Long Dien station, the life and death struggle was reaching its breaking point. Toan stood in front of diem, facing down the hitman and the black muzzle of his gun. 10 seconds. The hitman laughed. "You think that USB is some kind of magic trick. Give it here." He pulled the trigger. A loud crack echoed through the air, but Toan didn't fall. A shot from the woods hit the hitman's hand, sending his gun flying. "Police, drop your weapons." It was Detective Min's team. They had been tailing diem since she left the city. Chaos erupted. Toan grabbed Diem's hand, pulling her toward a freight train that was slowly beginning to roll away. They tumbled into a train car, filled with dry straw. The train let out a roar as it pulled away from the platform and into the darkness. Toan slumped back, blood still seeping from the wound in his arm, but his eyes were sharp and fully conscious. I remember now, diem Tuan whispered over the rhythmic clatter of the tracks. Mrs. Leanne, she isn't just a foster mother. She heads a ring that farms high IQ orphans. She funds their education and then plants them in major corporations to carry out underground financial crimes. I was just one of dozens. 2DM was stunned. A criminal network masquerading as a charity had existed for decades. So the ledger, it's not paper records. Toan pulled out the USB. It's a list of children like me embedded in government agencies and construction firms. Leanne uses it to blackmail and control the entire system. I stole it because I didn't want anyone else to live like a slave. Back at the city police station, Mrs. Leanne received an anonymous text. The package vanished on train 402. She stood up and adjusted her clothes, preparing to walk out of the interrogation room with her usual calm. But as she opened the door, Detective Min was standing there, holding an emergency arrest warrant. Mrs. Leanne, you're under arrest for organized crime, money laundering, and child abuse, Min said firmly. You have no evidence, she replied, trying to maintain her arrogant smirk. We have more than evidence. Min held up a phone playing a live video feed. On the screen, Toan and 2DM were in a secure office at a neighboring province's police station. Toan was entering the encryption key for the USB. A list of hundreds of names, bank accounts, and recordings of black market deals appeared. But the most chilling part was at the bottom, a file labeled Project Phoenix, subject Toan. It detailed the plan to stage an accident to wipe Toan's memory once he started showing signs of rebellion. The ultimate sacrifice she had once described to her neighbors was actually an attempted murder. She had planned to erase who he was and turn him into a memory-less machine, never expecting that his love for 2DM was a source code stronger than any drug or trauma. Mrs. Leanne collapsed onto the cold floor. The mask of the kind mother shattered completely, revealing a soul rotted by power and greed. A month later, at Mrs. Bay's farm in Long Dien, peace had returned. Toan sat on the porch, his arms still bandaged, but his color back. In the kitchen, Mrs. Bay was humming old songs while cooking a pot of fragrant congee. 2DM walked out and set 2 cups of tea on the table. Any regrets? She asked, looking out at the lush green fields. The career, the money, and the city. You have nothing left now. Toan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent he had almost lost. I have everything, Diem. I have my memories, my freedom, and I have you. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver ring with the flame design, the one that had stayed with him through life and death. He gently slid it onto her finger. The purple flame isn't just for burning down lies. It's for keeping us warm for the rest of our lives. Under the glow of the sunset, the two of them leaned into each other. The dark past had receded, making way for a new beginning. But in a corner of the city, the Project Phoenix files were still being expanded by the police. The war against the darkness might not be over, but they weren't alone anymore. In the dim light of her luxurious but gloomy living room, Mrs. Leanne sat as still as a plaster statue. The detectives had left after a 4-hour interrogation, but their presence still seemed to haunt the shadows. She reached out and picked up a photo of Toan. the one where he was smiling brightly on his graduation day. Her fingers traced his face slowly, her skin feeling rough against the glossy paper. A faint, twisted smile appeared. "My son," she whispered, her voice completely cold. "You were a masterpiece. And a masterpiece isn't allowed to have a soul of its own." The next morning, Detective Min returned with a fresh stack of documents. He didn't sit down. Instead, he circled her, creating an invisible pressure. "Mrs. Leanne, you said you were home alone the night Toan went missing. But a neighbor saw a black car with unfamiliar plates parked in front of your house for 2 hours. How do you explain that?" Mrs. Leanne didn't blink, her hands perfectly interlaced. "Detective, the memory of a lonely old woman can be fuzzy. Perhaps it was a delivery driver or someone asking for directions. I was far too heartbroken to worry about such trivial things." "Malquarti, what about the call you made to a burner phone right after the threatening call reached Toan's device?" Min suddenly delivered the deciding blow. A tiny fracture of a crack appeared at the corner of Leanne's eye. In a split second, she regained her composure, her eyes welling up again. I was just trying everything to save my son. I called a fortune teller. I was desperate, Min. You don't have children. You wouldn't understand." Min stayed silent. He knew he was facing an incredibly intelligent cobra. She never answered a question directly. She always shrouded the truth in a fog of emotion and manufactured grief. Meanwhile, on the freight train barreling through the fields, Toan tried to keep diem calm. She had bandaged the wound on his arm with a strip of cloth torn from her scarf. Diem listened carefully. Toan said, his voice low but steady. "Leanne didn't just raise me. She's been injecting me with experimental drugs since I was a child to optimize my memory and focus. That's why I can design complex structures in such a short amount of time." Diem gasped, covering her mouth. "So, your memory loss?" "Yes." Toan nodded painfully. "The amnesia wasn't entirely from the accident. It's a wipe mode she programmed into my mind through psychological therapy and chemicals. When I planned to betray her and took the USB, she triggered it. She wanted me to become a hollow shell, a loyal tool forever." "But you remembered why?" Diem asked, her tears falling on his hand. Toan looked deep into her eyes, his gaze filled with an intense power. "Because of something she couldn't calculate, love. When I saw you at the farm, when I smelled your scent, a primal emotional circuit exploded, breaking through every chemical barrier in my brain. You are my only antidote." The train pulled over at a small suburban station. Mr. Thu was already waiting there with a covert ambulance. "Toan Diem, get in quick," Mr. Thu signaled. As soon as they were inside, Toan connected the USB to Mr. Thu's laptop. "Mr. Thu, we don't have much time. Leanne has a network of bodyguards hunting us. But more importantly, I need you to help me contact these people." The Project Phoenix list appeared on the screen. It wasn't just Toan. There was a top surgeon, a government cybersecurity expert, and an architect currently designing the new Parliament building. All were orphans who had once been under Leanne's thumb. "They're all being controlled just like me," Toan said, his eyes burning. "She uses them to manipulate the entire country. if we send this data to Interpol, we don't just save ourselves, we save hundreds of other lives. Back in the city, Leanne realized she was backed into a corner. After Min left, she stepped into a secret room behind her bookshelf where a sophisticated computer system was flickering. Initiate self-destruct for file 402, she ordered coldly. Ma'am, the subject, Toan is uploading data to the cloud, a computer voice replied. Leanne smiled a chilling, gruesome smile. Is that so? Then play the final card. Contact the mole in the police force. Tell him diem must die. Right in front of Toan's eyes. She didn't need the ledger anymore. She wanted revenge. She wanted Toan to live in regret and madness forever. That was the ultimate punishment for the man who betrayed his mother. Mr. Thu took Toan and Diem to an abandoned riverside warehouse, thinking it was the safest spot. But they didn't realize the ambulance had been bugged with a tracker. In the dead of night, dark shadows surrounded the warehouse. The sound of footsteps crunching on gravel made Diem's heart pound. They're here, Tuan said, gripping a metal bar. He looked at Diem and kissed her forehead. Diem, if anything happens, take this USB and run for the river. Mr. Thu will get you out. No, I'm not leaving you. The battle broke out violently. Gunshots tore through the night. Mr. Thu, using his skills as a former cop, took down the first two men. But there were too many of them. The man in black, the one who had chased them from Long Dien, stepped in gun leveled. He looked at Toan with pure contempt. The boss sends her regards, Toan. She said a defective product shouldn't exist. He aimed straight at Diem. Bang! Toan lunged forward, using his body as a shield. The bullet slammed into his shoulder, but he didn't fall. With a surge of strength, fueled by pure rage, he tackled the hitman, and the two of them spiraled onto the dusty floor. At that exact moment, the roar of Min's police sirens filled the air. The SWAT teams swarmed the building. At the police station, Mrs. Leanne was calmly sipping tea when Min walked in. This time, he wasn't alone. Accompanying him was a middle-aged man with a heavily scarred face, one of the first victims of Project Phoenix, who had escaped years ago. Do you recognize him, Mrs. Leanne? Min asked, his voice like ice. Mrs. Leanne's composure completely shattered. The teacup slipped from her hand, smashing into pieces on the floor. No, you're dead. I saw it with my own eyes. You were wrong. The man spoke up, his voice trembling with years of built-up hatred. We aren't products. We are human beings. The data from Toan's USB spread like wildfire. Major news outlets simultaneously broke the story on the Phoenix scandal. Mrs. Leanne was led away to a chorus of jeers from the crowd gathered outside. Tuan lay in a hospital bed, with Diem sitting beside him, holding his hand tightly. The morning sunlight streamed through the window, warm and gentle. It's finally over, Diem whispered. Tuan smiled, though his face was still pale. Not yet. We still have to help the others on that list. But first, he paused, looking deep into her eyes. I want to go back to Long Dien. I want to cook you a real meal over a wood fire under Mrs. Bay's porch. Diem laughed, tears of happiness rolling down her cheeks. The purple flame in her heart was no longer fueled by anger or despair. It was the light of a bright new beginning. Mrs. Leanne might have created Toan the engineer, but it was diem who saved Toan the man she loved. In the battle between cold calculation and sincere love, the heart had won the final victory. Earlier that week, under the dim city streetlights, diem had sat in her old car, her eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, but burning with iron resolve. She was no longer the fragile girl crying over her lost love. In her veins, the purple flame had hardened into something cold and razor-sharp. She looked at the map she'd hand-drawn in her notebook. The police were watching Leanne, but they were following a manual. She was following the instinct of a woman protecting the soul of her life. Diem returned to the small cafe where Tuan had last been seen before he vanished. She didn't ask the staff who he was with. She asked about his habits. What did he usually order? She asked the waiter. A black Americano, no sugar. And he always sat in the farthest corner, constantly writing in a small blue notebook, the waiter recalled. Diem froze. A blue notebook. Among the items Leanne had handed over to the police, there was no blue notebook. She knew Toan had a habit of scribbling technical codes when he was stressed. If Leanne hadn't turned it in, it meant it held something she was terrified of. She started searching public trash cans around the area, a desperate move no cop would bother with. After 3 hours at the bottom of a tipped-over bin 2 blocks away, she found it. The notebook was soaked, but Toan's handwriting was still legible. It wasn't a diary. It was a list of addresses, and the last address was underlined 3 times, Cold Storage Number 9, Old Port. As Diem approached the old harbor, she realized she wasn't alone. 2 men in dark jackets stood smoking near the entrance, their eyes fixed on her car. Leanne's men. Diem whispered, her heart hammering, but her hand stayed steady on the wheel. She didn't run. She picked up her phone and called Mr. Thu. I'm at the old port, warehouse 9. I'm going in. If I don't call back in 15 minutes, bring the police. Don't wait a single second. Diem got out and circled around the back of the abandoned facility. She climbed through a broken window, the smell of rust and damp cold hitting her nose. Inside, warehouse 9. The room was empty, but on the floor were dried bloodstains and a silver ring. A flame-shaped ring identical to hers, but bent out of shape. Toan! Diem choked out, but she immediately forced herself to focus. He was here. He fought back. At the villa, Mrs. Leanne sat before a bank of security monitors. She watched Diem through a hidden lens at the port. A satisfied smile crept across her heavily made-up wrinkled face. This girl is a truly delightful surprise, she said to the assistant standing behind her. She found that place faster than I expected. Let her in. I want her to see my masterpiece with her own eyes before they both vanish together. Leanne didn't just want to kill Toan. She wanted to destroy their love, the one thing she could never have, the one thing that threatened her absolute control over her poor foster children. In the basement of the cold storage facility, Diem found a thick steel door. She used a metal bar to pry it open, and a blast of freezing air rushed out. In the center of the room was Toan. He was strapped into an electronic chair, his head tangled in strange wires. His eyes were wide open, but lifeless like a broken doll. Toan, baby, Diem rushed over, cupping his cold face in her hands. Toan didn't react. A voice crackled through a speaker on the wall. "It's useless, Diem. I'm in the final stage of the restructuring. Every memory of you is being wiped from his brain. In 10 minutes, he'll wake up, and the first person he sees will be me, his great mother. As for you, you'll just be a stranger he's ordered to eliminate. You're a monster, Diem screamed through her tears. "No, I am a creator." Leanne's voice rang out with pride. "Your love is trash. It makes him weak. Only obedience can make him great." Diem looked at the countdown on the computer. 5 minutes. She knew she couldn't break the system with force. She looked into Toan's vacant eyes and started talking. She didn't beg. She told him stories. "Toan, do you remember the day we met in the rain? You gave me your only umbrella and said you'd rather watch the rain than stay dry. Do you remember the taste of the dinner I cooked? You said it was too salty, but you finished every last bite." Diem pressed her ear against Toan's chest. "Your heart, it still belongs to me. She can wipe your memories, but she can't erase the way your heart beats for me." She took his hand, placed the bent silver ring into his palm, and squeezed it tight. "If you forget me, then let this pain remind you." Suddenly, Toan's pupils contracted. A surge of electricity jolted through his body, and the machinery began to beep uncontrollably. Outside, police sirens wailed. Mr. Thu led detective men as they stormed the port. Leanne's guards were quickly neutralized. In the control room, Leanne panicked as "system error" flashed across the screens. "Impossible. Emotional data cannot override chemical encryption." Tuan suddenly took a deep, gasping breath, and the light slowly returned to his eyes. He looked at Diem, his lips trembling. "Diem, run. There's a bomb." She planted a bomb. It turned out Leanne had prepared for the worst. If she couldn't have Tuan, no one would. Diem didn't run. She used every ounce of strength she had to rip the wires off Tuan's head. "We're going together." They lunged out of the basement just as a massive explosion tore through the old warehouse. Smoke and fire filled the air. As the dust settled, detective men saw 2 figures leaning on each other emerging from the wreckage. Tuan's face was covered in ash, but he held Diem tight as if he was afraid she'd disappear again. Mrs. Leanne was arrested at her villa while trying to destroy the last of her files. When she was led past Tuan and Diem at the hospital, she stopped and glared at Tuan with pure hatred. Tuan looked straight at her, his voice calm but powerful. "You were never my mother. You're just a blacksmith who failed against a real heart." Months later, at a small house in the suburbs, Diem was watering clusters of purple flame flowers in the evening sun. Tuan walked out of the house carrying 2 glasses of water. His memory had mostly recovered. There were still gaps sometimes, but he wasn't afraid of them anymore. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, hugging her from behind. "I'm thinking about how lucky we are." Diem leaned her head on his shoulder. "And how that fire, it really can burn away any darkness." The case of Project Phoenix closed with the proper prison sentences. But for Tuan and Diem, the real story of a love reborn from the ashes was only just beginning. They weren't running from the past anymore, because they knew that no matter how many times they might forget, fate would always bring them back together.